It's actually several days later, and as you can see, I've been working on repairing this right side tab right here. This is the front of the bike this way. And I've got it probably 90-95% done. I think you can see there. I'll talk about the other side here in just a minute. And if you recall, I had two cracks. I had one here, and one here. And what I did is I took the stainless steel wire, or mesh, be a better way to describe it, and I cut a circular piece, and then I used the heat pencil here, tool, and I melted essentially that wire mesh into the back side of the damage, as you can see there. First I had applied tape to it. I should mention I used this aluminized or aluminum tape on the face side here, which obviously has been removed. And then I pressed the mesh into the substrate, as you can see there. And you can just see evidence of it, I think, right there, all the way around. Then I got it in as far as I thought I could or should. I didn't want to distort the plastic on the face side. I used the filler rod supplied with the kit right here to go over the top of the mesh, which is now embedded in the plastic, to skim it over. And that's most of what you see right here. So there's a couple of discoveries and learnings from this. Again, I've never used this exact technique before. Probably should have gone a little deeper with pushing the wire mesh into the substrate. As you can see there, it's a little bit exposed. It is embedded, but I probably could have been a little more aggressive in pushing it in. Again, I want to avoid distorting this back side. Number two, this filler rod really doesn't work very well. It's too soft. You can almost literally flake it off with your fingernail like that. It's some kind of a universal plastic. I don't know what it's made out of. I wouldn't have any idea without doing research. It worked. It stuck. It's soft. It doesn't sand very well. It tends to want to ball up and roll up when you sand it. So I experimented with that a little bit. Didn't like how that went, so I switched over to ABS. So I took a piece of ABS pipe, cut some strips. That's what you can see here. This is actually ABS, and I used that instead of that filler rod and did the rest of the repair, this is very hard. It's the same substance as this. That worked out much better. So going forward, I'm going to use ABS and not that universal filler rod. But it worked out okay. It was a learning for me, and that was my intention, having never used this this tool before, and this exact technique. I've done with fiberglass on the back, but never used heat like this with a wire mesh. Again, face side came out pretty good. One little divot, I don't know if you can see it right there. That was original. I didn't create that during this repair process. That can be filled with body filler. And again, it's probably 90-95% done. Now, one other thing I had to think through was reshaping this hole, because when you do the filling and you're working around there, you tend to get filler or the rod or the ABS inside of that hole, intruding into the hole. So what I did is I measured these other holes around the part and determined that they're approximately 16 millimeter, and I wanted just a little bit of a slip fit. You can see right there. So I dug around in my sockets and came up with a socket that's just undersized. It's slightly smaller than this one, in fact, as you can see. This is 120 grit sandpaper. That's what I've used for everything so far, in case you're wondering. And then I just used this socket with sandpaper to essentially work it like this till I could reshape that hole, make it round. And then I use this piece as an approximation of the size I was going for, so that I get a nice round, originally sized hole. And it's pretty close right now. It's real close, in fact. If you measure it, it's real close to 16 millimeters. The other thing I use is this real good quality nippers. This is a flush cutting nipper. I think you can see here. This is one of my model railroading tools that I used to use. This is probably 25 years old, and you usually use it when you're trying to flush cut plastic parts. That's what it's really made for. It's really high quality. And what I use that for is if there's any edges of the wire mesh that would stick up here, and I had a few. I went around with this flush cutting nippers and just cut them off and just pushed them down, but they weren't sharp, and it's all perfectly smooth now. I'm not intending to do much more work here on the inside. I might smooth it a little bit, but I'm pretty much going to leave it alone. If I do any further work, it might be here on the outside, but even that is going to be minimal. Now I'm going to move or shift my focus to the opposite side. This is the left side. This is the one that was quite a bit worse condition. Had a crack that ran all the way up to here. You see I've drilled a hole at the end of the crack to stop the propagation of the crack further up into the fender. And then I've already covered the outside with this aluminum tape in preparation for the next step. Try to get everything back in position as best I could. These parts are kind of just flopping around out there in space. You can see it's really cracked right there, and it's also starting to crack right there. In fact, I think about the only thing that's holding that together is paint. I have already, let me see if I can find it here for you, made a pattern for the aluminum. That's what this is. It's just a paper pattern that I laid in. I taped it in place, something like that, and you can see the hole right there I'm pointing to with my middle finger, and I secured that with a drill bit so that I could do this kind of a thing. And then once I was satisfied with the pattern, I removed it, laid it on the wire mesh, and cut out the matching piece. And then I rounded the corners. You don't want to leave the corners sharp if you can help it. And so I made the wire mesh screen piece right there. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to locate this like that, something like that. And it's just approximate, so don't get too concerned about it. I'll finesse it into place. Something along that order right there. I'm going to start here at the top, and I'm going to again embed this mesh into this substrate and just work my way around and carefully embed it, and then go back over it with this plastic ABS as a filler and just fill over the top, and particularly in this area here where it's damaged, in here, and then do similar on the outside that I did over here. The repair on the outside will depend on what it looks like, but that's my plan. I will try to capture as much of this as I can on video for you, but again, this is intricate work and I've got to get in there tight. I'm not sure how much I can show you, but I'll do my best. So I got to change my setup here a little bit, and we'll go ahead and start tacking this in place. I'm giving you a wider shot here so you can generally see how I'm going to or have set this up. I've got my vise over here just to support the end of this unit so it doesn't flop around. I've got to have a way to secure it. I've only got two hands. Underneath the repair area right here, I have a couple of V-blocks for my machining setups that I just pushed underneath here so that when I push down on this fender here, I've got something to press against, and they're steel. So obviously when you're working with heat, that's what you want to use rather than against like cardboard. So it's really designed just to hold it while I use my hands to affect the repair. I'm going to begin the repair up here. In other words, I'm going to position this stainless steel mesh, something like that, and just begin pressing it in here with the shoe of the heat unit and work my way back towards me and depress or shape the mesh into the cavity here as I go. And if it ends up hanging out a little bit further this way over the edge, I'll trim it back. I'd rather it didn't hang over if I could help it, but you got to find that sweet spot where you don't want it to not completely cover the repair area either. So that's the goal here. This should be pretty hot. Let's test it here in a little piece of ABS and see if it melts. Yeah, it does. You can see that, I think. It gets really hot, by the way. Really, really hot. I think that's about ready to go. Let me get my safety glasses on here a second. And be careful about breathing the vapors here too. I don't know how healthy that is. Breathing vapors, plastic vapors, so I try to stand back a little bit. Now, as I cautioned a moment ago, you know, I might get my head in here a little bit. You're just going to have to bear with me because I have to see what I'm trying to do. Let me zoom in here a little bit for you. A little bit closer if I can. See if we can't get you in the shot a little more. So, see what we can do here. Again, the hole, you can see the hole right there I'm pointing to. That hole was drilled to stop the propagation of that crack. It's a common technique that's used in metalworking, plastic working, everything like that. Of course, I don't want to burn myself either in this process, so essentially what I'm trying to do right here is tack that in place. Softening the substrate underneath. Smoothing as I go. You got to be careful you don't drop the heel of the tool and get up into this area of the fender and do more damage if you can help it. Smooth it out a little bit. You can kind of get a feel for the technique that works. And you can see there how it's going. So I'm just going to continue on now and keep working my way towards the edge of the fender, pressing that mesh into the softened plastic. Now, one note, as I work my way this way outward, I'm going to work this mesh down into the cavity, as I alluded to earlier, which will have the effect of pulling the edge that way, which is perfectly fine. I'm not concerned about that at this point. And that's still just a little bit hot or warm. At this point it's warm, it's not so much hot. Let's take a look at the opposite side though. You can see there what's going on. Not much, which is exactly, and the repair is right in this area. Ooh, that's hot. That tape is hot. It's right in this area here is where we've been working. So I'm just going to continue on with that, and not sure how much of that you're going to see or want to see because it becomes quite redundant. I thought I would stop and show you how it's going. As you can see, I've got it down into here, and I ended up trimming back this mesh just a little bit because it was overhanging here where I'm pointing to, just a little bit. So I just used these side cutters because they were a little easier to get in there than this one, though either one would probably have worked. But nonetheless, I trimmed that back just a little bit, and I worked it in. You can see that, worked that in with my finger so that the mesh conforms to the shape, that concave shape, and I've got it done. Well, you can see how far I've got it done. So what I'm going to do at this point is just keep going, basically, and work my way out, like this, so that I end up out here at the edge. And I keep checking the back side every so often, make sure nothing's going wrong. As far as I can tell, it looks fine there. But now I'm just going to keep working my way out until all of the mesh is embedded into the plastic. Trying to show you a little bit here what I'm doing. It's actually probably more like soldering than welding, frankly. Kind of a cross between the two. And what I'm doing is I'm applying the heat more to the plastic itself, the filler, as you can see there, I hope. And just spreading it around. I don't care about the hole because I'm going to cut that out anyway and resize it like I did here. So that's totally irrelevant to me. In fact, while I'm doing it, I think I'll just work my way around and add a layer of plastic. The reason I'm focusing on softening the filler rather than the part initially is I don't want to soften this too much and melt it. Distort the other side. And I know you can't probably see a lot of that because of the way the part is setting, so I'll bring you back in a few minutes. There's most of the repairs complete. I filled it from here all the way around to here. You can see, I think, the buildup of the filler right there. And actually I put more in this corner here than it probably appears. And any of this excess can be sanded off, of course. I might put a little bit more filler right here and here. But generally I would say it's almost complete in terms of the filler itself. Still a little warm, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like and how it's done. I decided to V this crack out a bit. You can see starting at the hole that I drilled. That's an 1/8 inch hole, by the way. I used my Dremel with a plastic cut-off saw blade, like you can see there, I think. And a little bit with a triangular shaped file, but I found this Dremel worked better. I should have, in retrospect, I should have done that before I put the mesh, embedded the mesh into the back side. I could have done it after I had applied the metal tape, but I didn't want to cut through into the mesh, obviously. You might be able to just see a little bit of the mesh through there, so didn't go as deep as I probably would have liked to, but it is V'd out nonetheless from here all the way around basically to right here in preparation for sealing that crack up. And this crack here and here I really didn't have to do much with because they're already pretty much open. And my next step is to use a combination using the filler, the ABS filler, and the heat shoe. I'm going to seal that crack up all the way along here, here, and here, and then generally I think I'm going to build this area up a little bit. That's my my plan. Now I'm not going to show you all of that because I know I'm going to get my head in the way of doing that in this crack. So I'll bring it back a little bit later. But I think you got the gist of what I'm going to do, and you'll see the results here in a few minutes. Probably 10 minutes or so later, and using the filler, the ABS filler, not the material that came with the kit. You can see where in the shiny spots here where I filled in the divot, the hole, the crack that I opened up, and went around here and filled it as well. It's just a touch on the warm side right now. It's not hot. Next step will be to sand and file, which will take some time. It'll be a little bit laborious. Start shaping this ABS off. Now my intent with the ABS or the plastic filler is not to make it perfect. I'll probably end up using body filler to finish it off, but what I want to do is get the general contour and shape back. And then again, I'm not going to do a whole lot on the inside. I might smooth that out a little bit. I might end up using a Dremel sanding puff for that. I don't know yet. Might have to use a little file here and there, but that's going to be the next steps, is to try to clean this up. Might have to fill it again a little bit, sand it back, you know, back and forth to see where we end up. But it's good and stiff now, that's for sure. It's not going anywhere. Anyway, that's where we're at right now.